My name is Milo, DJ Mighty Ma. I think you either fall in love with hip-hop the first time you hear it or you don't, you know? And my mom moved up to New York when I was very young, and I would go up to visit her and go to Coney Island and hear Sucker MCs by Run DMC coming from the rides. They used to have a DJ DJing while the people were on the rides, and it was over for me once I heard Sucker MCs. Then just growing up in Philly, hip-hop was huge in Philly in the 80s. You know, we were like a close second to New York. So it was all around me growing up, and I just decided to kind of go from fan to artist. Well, you know, the DJ ran things. You know, it was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. It was Cash Money and Marvelous. So the DJ was the centerpiece of the group. So I realized very young that I wasn't a good rapper, and that, you know, it was Plan B, which was DJing, which ended up being just a blessing in disguise, because, you know, I always tell people when they say, oh, you have it so good, you know, out in Vegas DJing, I say, hey man, I got lucky. I picked that right hobby when I was a teenager. You know, I didn't think it was going to lead to a career till I was, you know, in my middle age and stuff, but it just happened to go that way. Turntables, I worked at Foot Locker in the Gallery Mall, you know, what Fresh Prince talks about. And I saved and saved and saved all summer, you know, because even back then they were very expensive. I think they were even like $350 or $400 in 1986, you know. So it was a very valuable piece of equipment, the Technics 1200, even back then. So I saved, and I worked in the stock room at Foot Locker, and I think I saved the whole summer and got one of them, you know, just one. And then later I was able to get a second one, and then I had the Gemini 1200 mixer, the wooden one, you know, and that was really like the setup for back then. That's really what you rolled with. Well, my dad was like a music person. He's like a jazz author, you know, and he never liked hip hop, but I think he always kind of respected that I was going to try to do that for a living. You know, he wasn't necessarily into the art form. And then I remember when Eon and I started making records, we came to him and we said, hey, Rawkus is thinking about signing us, but Tommy Boy is also. And I remember he said, so you guys are hot right now. And that he still didn't really understand that, like, you know, that we were going to go on and make records and stuff. But, you know, my parents were always supportive because they were both into the arts. I would say just working with artists, you know, like working with rap artists was always a challenge, because once Eon and I did the label more seriously, you know, and we would say, hey, we're going to do a 50-50 deal with you. Somehow we were still the bad guys, you know, like the label is always the bad guy. So I'd say that was the challenge of being an artist, but also having to be a label person that had to kind of deal with, you know, the guys we were signing at the time. I would say work with the guys who I came up with, who I idolized growing up, you know, doing a song with Kool Keith or Kool G Rap or Big Daddy Kane, you know, those were like, you know, my Elvises. So to actually be in the studio with Big Daddy Kane was like a dream come true, you know. So those were the best memories of working with the generation before me. Well, I was always a club DJ, you know. Even when I was doing High and Mighty, I was working in New York clubs as a club DJ. So I always had that side of me. And I was always kind of able to make, you know, the distinction between the two, but I feel like sometimes it would lend into my production. Like B-Boy Document was like kind of like a, you know, borderline, you know, club record, or Dick Starbuck, another one off Home Field Advantage, you know. So I always kind of felt a little pressure to make records that could almost relate in the clubs, even though, you know, that never really like came to fruition. But I'd say the club thing trickled into my production. Well, I'm pretty realistic about my own career. You know, I know the impact we made, you know, what level it was, you know. But I'd say, like, when somebody hits me up on Instagram and says, puts up a picture of Home Field Advantage and says, hey, Mighty Ma, this came out when I was 16 and it got me through hard times. Like, that is the biggest flattering to me. That's what's flattering most to me, you know what I mean? Because that's how I felt when I was a teenager about Big Daddy Kane and EPMD, you know what I mean? So when I can see that I had an influence on somebody's life musically, that makes it all worth it.